This is Big Tasty Sports.
We are inching nearer to the playoffs. Yanni's back with me tonight, and we are on a bit of an abbreviated schedule. We're going to knock through these games and see what we can find. Yanni, some things are getting exciting. There's actually more and more games that are mattering as we approach the playoffs.
Yeah, it's fun, man. Both conferences, really, and for different reasons. I think obviously the NFC is maybe a little more top heavy, AFC is a little more balanced, but either way, there's a lot of exciting stuff down the stretch here. I think it's going to be a fun last few weeks here.
Yeah, I hope so too. Well, let's jump right into it here, and I'm going to start us out with the Thursday game. We got more and more to pick from that actually matter. So this is New Orleans going to the Rams, and 4.5 point favorites. The Rams are. New Orleans is going to have a lot of say in what happens to their postseason as they play the Rams and then they play Tampa Bay as well. In this game, the Rams offense has been looking phenomenal. Do you think New Orleans is actually having a bit of pulling it together here where they're going to be able to go and give the Rams a game, or the Rams really like starting to look like at least a tough game in the playoffs?
This is an interesting one. I think for me, the Rams are a little bit better at this point. They're a little more consistent, certainly offensively, but you have to be at least a little bit encouraged if you're a Saints fan based on the fact that Derek Carr played one of his, if not best games this last weekend, I think. And obviously, can he continue to do that and string those together? We'll see. But I think, I'll be honest, I think the number's a little too high here. I think that this should be LA -3. And I was a little surprised that it's not LA -3. So I actually like the Saints a little bit here at -4, just because I feel like this is going to be a close football game. You kind of look back at the Rams, and they were never really in jeopardy against the Commanders. I mean, they had that game pretty well in hand from start to finish, but they also didn't completely steamroll them either. It was kind of one of those things where like they were in control. It was fine. But I think when you look at this Saints team, they strike me as that team that they kind of play to their competition a little bit. We've seen that throughout the year. And I think they're a fairly decent matchup against this Rams team on both sides of the ball. So for me, when I look at this game, I think the Rams win this, but I don't like the 4. I think I'm leaning the other direction with the Saints here as far as the spread goes.
Yeah, I don't have too much on this game. I have some others I like more, so I won't belabor it too much. I think the Saints are getting a little bit healthy. A week or two ago, I said I had made a personal rule to never bet on the Saints. I probably won't violate that here because I think the Rams have been looking good. But one of the things that I wonder is, this happens every year, but I just notice it week by week where we get so high or low on teams because they win a few or lose a few. And then one game turns it all around. And so, yes, the Rams have looked good in 4 straight games. Now they've been scoring a lot of points. Commanders, they played that really good game against the Ravens. I thought that was an impressive game by then. The Browns away from home always give up a lot of points. They beat the Cardinals. So I'm not down on the Rams. I think they look good. I just kind of wonder if this streak over the last 4 weeks is a little bit inflated, and that would push me to your side of thinking this is more likely to be a close game than it is to be a blowout. So if I was going to bet it, I would lean toward the Saints side, but I probably won't violate my rule on the Saints, and I'll probably just pass here. But big playoff implications.
Yeah, for sure. And passing on this one, no harm in that. Just again, to me, it's the number. I think if this had been -3, I probably would have gone with the Rams. You have the possibility of the push, obviously, but that to me seems a lot better. I would much rather bet the Rams -3 than the Saints +4, even though I think with that number shift, the Saints become the better play there.
Yeah. Yeah, and ESPN bet you can get 4.5 -115, so we'll see if that pushes up at all. I mean, once you get past 4.5, I feel like it's not as big of a deal till you get to like 6. But if you get 4.5 at -110, I mean, not a bad look in a game like this. So, all right, let's move on to Saturday. These games are really spread out over the Christmas weekend here. Another big game now, Cincinnati going to Pittsburgh. Cincinnati gets that comeback against the Vikings, where the Vikings defense, stops people forever and then decides to give up a couple late touchdowns. I did think it was funny. I saw Jake Browning was yelling, "You never should have cut me," which I thought was pretty hilarious, by the way. And maybe not. I'd rather have him playing than Nick Mullins or Josh Dobbs or anybody right now with the way he's been going. So Pittsburgh obviously struggling a lot here lately. And Cincinnati's a 2.5-point favorite. It's a divisional clash, and it's in Pittsburgh. Can you bet against the Steelers here?
You can, in my opinion here. And you're right. It's in Pittsburgh. It is a divisional game. But again, we're under that key number of 3, which in a game like this, I think is huge. I think this is probably where the spread should be. But I like the Bengals in this spot, even though I think the line is probably pretty accurate here. Pittsburgh, it sounds like is starting Mason Rudolph. And, the fans in Pittsburgh are like, yeah, we need to start Mason Rudolph. Apparently they've forgotten that he's not any good at quarterback either. I mean, I get it. You're frustrated. Pickett wasn't playing well. He gets hurt. Trubisky's not playing well. So I get it. You want anything other than what's not working. But I think they forget that Mason Rudolph wasn't really working when he had his opportunity either. So beyond that, though, I think the potentially bigger challenge here for Pittsburgh is, they're going back to what we saw earlier in the season. And granted, yes, we know they won some of those early season games, but I think we all knew that was fool's gold. They weren't as good as that record early in the season did. But what I mean when I say they're getting back to that is we're probably no Cam Hayward in this game, no Minka Fitzpatrick for sure in this game. And that Fitzpatrick injury is big for a lot of reasons. I mean, number one, he's a really good player. He kind of anchors that secondary, but KZ also is now suspended for the season. So now you're without both of your starting safeties. You're without Cam Hayward. All of a sudden you start looking at that defense. It's TJ Watt, it's Highsmith, and not a whole lot else out there really. So, I worry about that if I'm Pittsburgh. And then on the flip side, how much is Mason Rudolph really going to do? So even though I'm not going to sit here and say that I think Jake Browning is Joe Burrow and the Bengals aren't skipping a beat, I think things are just kind of falling into place for him. I mean, it's almost one of those things where sometimes they say better to be lucky than good. And I think in a lot of cases, that's what we're seeing right now with this Bengals team is it's like, okay, is Browning really that good? Are they doing this? But I think they're showing two things. Number one, they still do have good players on their team. I mean, you see Joe Mixon's played well since Burrow's been out. Chase has made some plays. Chase Brown, the rookie's made some plays. Higgins actually had a really nice game last week, even though he had a drop. But at the end of the day, I think this Pittsburgh team, we all agree, is not very good. And even though I'm not saying the Bengals are great at this point, I think that under a field goal, even on the road, I think Cincinnati's the side in this one.
Glad to hear you say it, man. I was waiting to talk to you before I bet it, but it's one of the ones that I had written down to go bet unless you talked me out of it. So I like Cincinnati minus 2.5 a lot. A couple things that I'll just throw in, and I think the things you brought up about the defensive side of the ball for Pittsburgh are really big. The people you named that are going to be out. But not a surprise, but the Steelers' offense has just been so bad for so long, too. I mean, 13 against the Colts, 18 against the Patriots, 10 against the Cardinals. Even when they beat Cincinnati before, they only scored 16, 10 against the Browns. I mean, they just haven't been scoring. And then to give up 30 to the Colts, to give up 21 to the Patriots, even, like, it's pretty bad. That's not a good offense. So I just think this is a team that isn't good on either side of the ball right now. In addition, Pittsburgh feels a little bit dysfunctional to me at this point. It seems like people aren't happy, where Cincinnati feels almost exactly the opposite, where they've kind of rallied around this idea that Joe Burrow isn't there and now everybody's against us and nobody thinks we can do anything. And Jake Browning is proving to be a little bit of a leader too, I think, with the way that he's talking and the way he's bringing that team along. And I think leadership is worth something. Obviously, if you have no talent, you suck. Being a leader isn't going to make you a good quarterback. But I think if you're an okay quarterback and you've got some leadership, I think it does matter. So I think Cincinnati just goes in here with the momentum, which isn't worth betting on its own, but in a spot where I would like Cincinnati anyway. And Pittsburgh feels like they're falling apart. Give me under 3 points for sure. So I'll be adding that one when we're done.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
The other thing that I would consider here, I haven't gone to look what it is. Let's see, what was the total here? Yeah, 38.5. It's probably going to be low. As long as the weather isn't terrible, I would consider Cincinnati team total over here as well. It's not going to be too high with a 38.5 total.
Right. I think that's a good call out as well. I think that's something you could absolutely look at.
Yeah. worth checking the weather. I know like last weekend, it got pretty crazy on the East Coast. So that's worth looking at.
Right.
All right. On the same page there. Hey, let's touch really quick. We can skip over this quick because this week isn't going to be exciting, but how are you feeling about the Bills needing to certainly win the next two and probably win out to make the playoffs, but looking like they're putting it together?
It's one of those things where when you've lost to the Patriots, when you've lost to the Broncos at home, you can't take anything for granted. But at the same time, it seems like the light switch kind of went off a little bit in terms of what they're doing. I think obviously they've taken a little bit different approach offensively. The defense has played better the last couple weeks. So, and sometimes when you're replacing really good defensive starters, yes, you're going to lose some talent, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time to kind of have the new guys gel in a little bit. And I will say, the one move that sticks out is, that acquisition of Rasul Douglas has really helped their secondary. It allows them, and really, not to get too in depth of this, but the way Sean McDermott likes to set up his defense, he always relied on Trey White, whether they're playing man or zone, to be the lockdown guy. And he kind of functioned everything around him and Taron Johnson. Without Trey White, Douglas has kind of stepped into that role, and really provided a boost there. So anyways, I think when you look at it, there's really no reason they shouldn't blow the doors off this Chargers team. And I understand that you have an interim head coach, and we know that teams tend to play well in that first game after a coach is fired. We know all that. And to be honest, if Justin Herbert was out there, you could absolutely say, gosh, maybe they get into a shootout and, they lose at 35-32 type thing. But with Easton Stick out there, I don't think that that's going to be the dynamic offense that they have. And on the other side of the ball, we know that Chargers defense has been absolutely atrocious. So I just kind of feel like if the Bills are even remotely interested, they should roll them pretty easily here. And like you said, they pretty much have to win out. So I would hope that they are interested.
Yeah. Two things I'll say on this quick. I actually like the Bills at minus 11 right now, or 10.5 you can get, which I think it started out a lot higher than that when I first looked.
It was 12. I think it opened at 12.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Man, I like it. I think they win this game by 20, like you said, unless they're just not interested. The other thing is, I do a lot of stuff with futures. I might make another video this week just because it's kind of interesting coming into the end of the season, but I was playing around with a lot of different ways to look at the Bills going into the end of the year here. And this is a little off the beaten path, but once it gets released, a line for them against New England next week, I know it's wide, but you could parlay those two games together for them to just win the next two, just to get to that game with Miami at around minus 150, which doesn't seem too bad to me given the two teams they're playing. So
no. I mean, there's zero reason they should lose either of those games.
Yeah,
sure.
That's what I'm thinking too. That feels like a pretty good line to me for those. So
it's interesting. Yep.
All right, let's move on here. Let's see. Let's touch on Detroit and the Vikings because this has some playoff implications as well. It's in Minnesota. Detroit -3, kind of got back on the horse again last week, 46.5 total. Minnesota let that one get away for sure in Cincinnati, offensively and defensively, to be honest. Do you think that, this has the feeling of if Detroit gets things right, a game where I think they could win by a lot, but the line is close. Any thoughts on this one?
I think the way that Detroit plays, what you said is true most weeks, which is if they are on, they can win by a lot of points. I don't know in this spot though. And, I'll tell you what my favorite angle going into this is. I like the under in this game, and I know the Lions can put up points in bunches. And I know even, the Vikings offense now, they've got Jefferson, they've got their weapons. I mean, they can do some things. But I like the under here, especially right now it's at 46.5. It most likely, as we know, it'll probably trend up. And I think that if it gets to 47 or 47.5, it's worth a look at the under there, because I think that this Vikings defense, the way they're playing, they can give Goff some trouble here. Are they going to completely shut them down? Probably not, because we know they'll run it hard and, they'll find some throws there and make some plays, but I don't think they're going to score at will like they have in some games. I think this could be one of those kind of more kind of grind it out, maybe some punts, that kind of a thing. And I just don't know, when you look at the Lions, when they're really cranking, they're running the ball well. And, I part of the reason I was so high on the Lions and Montgomery and Gibbs last week is I knew the Broncos couldn't stop the run. But I don't think that's going to be the case for the Vikings. So I think it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle for Detroit in this game. My concern on the other side is I don't know what we'll get from that Vikings offense. I mentioned, obviously, the exception of the quarterback, they basically have their team back, which is nice, but obviously the quarterback is the most important position out there. So that's still a huge issue. So for me, I don't know that I necessarily love the spread here either way. And I think you kind of touched on it with saying, could Detroit run away with it? They could. But I don't know, man. I have this feeling that this is going to be more of those, like, at the end of the day, it's 23-17, 23-20, one of those kind of closer NFC North kind of, more physical type games. So I like the under here, if anything.
Yeah, I can definitely see the under. That makes sense. And one thing I'll say too about Minnesota is Nick Mullins actually played okay.
He did.
He and I tweeted this. I will take him over Josh Dobbs for sure. At least he can make some throws. Like, that offense worked better with him in there. Really, part of what it came down to was two really bad mistakes by him.
Right.
The one he's going down to the ground, that was the craziest interception you'll ever see. But both of those interceptions happened in the red zone. So you're taking at least 6 points off the board, maybe 10, maybe 14. If they had converted those possessions into points, they probably run away with that game, and Cincinnati probably doesn't come back.
Yeah, you're right.
And this has happened with Minnesota how many times this year, Yanni? It's like the story of every week. And so I guess talking through it makes me think, too, Detroit has not been one of the better teams in the league at getting takeaways. Now, Minnesota seems to like to give it to everyone, so that doesn't mean that they won't get them. But I think Minnesota is a team over and over where, if you look back through their games, they when they lose, especially if they lose by a lot, it's because they turn the ball over a lot.
Right.
When they don't, they tend to be in games. So, I don't know.
They match up right now. That Lions secondary is still thin. It's not one of the better secondaries in the league. And when you look at, you stack Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson across. That's a tough matchup. Now, again, can they give Mullins the time he needs? Can Mullins read the defense the way Kirk Cousins or someone else?
Right.
We'll see that. But I think that there's a lot to like there, which is, again, why I don't necessarily like Detroit on that spread, even though, like you said, they could get away with it. I think it's going to be a close game. And again, I think it's going to be more of that, like, we're going to see some punts in this game. And we're going to see some, we know the Lions are going to try to run the ball. And I don't know that they're necessarily going to be able to. So I don't know. I just think at the end of the day, like I said, I think this is more of like a high 30s type, low 40s type game.
All right. Well, I'm not betting either side of it, Yanni. I'm just gonna
I probably won't either. Yeah.
But, I like that under look though. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, all right, two other games I want to hit on for Sunday, and then we might have one on Monday too. But this is a big one. Dallas goes to Miami. Miami's -1.5. Man, huge showing from Miami against the Jets without Tyreek Hill, which was a big deal for them to put up 30 whatever points they did. Was it 34 they ended up with?
30, I think, but yeah.
30, okay. But without Tyreek Hill, that's a big deal for them, I think, because I felt like they really needed him, so that was good. Dallas obviously went on the road to Buffalo and got blown out. I think that's a tough spot for Dallas after beating Philadelphia going to Buffalo. So I was talking with messaging with Pig on Twitter today and just saying, like, Dallas probably isn't as good as what they looked against Philly at home, and they're probably not as bad as what they looked on the road against Buffalo.
Right.
So this is a big game for the playoffs for both of these teams. If Miami can win their next two games, they win the division. So if they lose one and Buffalo gets there, it's going to be the last game is for the division. How do you think Dallas fares in this game going down into South Beach?
This is a really, really, really interesting game to me. And it's really because when you look at these two teams, and we always talk about where do you find edges and what things are you looking at? And we've seen both of these teams at home play really well. On the road, not so much. We've seen both of these teams beat up on cupcakes really, really badly. We've
It's so
seen
true.
both of these teams struggle when they play good opponents. So now they're almost like mirror images in that. You know what I mean? So now it's like, well, who's the real one? Who's going to step up here? So for me, I mean, there's two things I look at here. Number one, that home field to me is huge in this game because of what we've said. I mean, and I think that again, the home team has to get the advantage here. So I think that's big. But the other thing, and I mentioned this last week, Dallas, it sounds crazy with the type of players they have on their team. They need Jonathan Hankins back in that lineup against Miami, and I don't know that he's going to be. They cannot stop the run without him, and we saw it last week on full display. And the
Yeah, we did.
crazy, yeah, and the crazy thing about that is, and we talk about this all the time. Okay, armchair quarterback, armchair coach, whatever. They had no adjustments whatsoever when they were getting the ball run down their throat. And you have to wonder, though, if that'll carry over, because I mean, Miami's going to try to run the ball too, with Mostert and HN, and they may be able to too without if Hankins isn't in that lineup there. So I don't know. There's one thing though that I think really bears watching here, and that's the health of the Dolphins' offensive line. They were able to hold it together against the Jets, but part of the reason they were is they got up early because their defense took care of them early and kind of put their offense in a good spot. I don't think Dallas is going to gift them the ball the way that the Jets did, as far as, a defensive touchdown, getting the ball on their side of the field. It's going to be a little different. So both of these teams are designed to play with the lead and play loose and free. So, and I don't know if you heard during the Bills game, Greg Olsen made a really good point. He said the number one key for the Bills is to get off to a fast start. He said Dallas, when they're up, they're unstoppable, but when they're playing from behind, it's a totally different story. They can't rush the passer with Micah Parsons in the way they want to do it. Not offensively, they can't take the chances they want to take, and all that stuff. So I think, again, this game, if I have to lean to the home team in Miami. But I don't know. I have a feeling that this sounds crazy, but I think this could be one of those classic type games that, because it has such playoff implications, I think it's going to be close. I don't know who's going to win. I give the edge to the home team, but I don't have a strong feeling either way.
Have you heard, is Tyreek Hill supposed to be back?
I would imagine so, only because it sounded like he was kind of 50-50 this week to go. So, I mean, that leads me to believe with another week, he probably would go. And I mean, look, they'd never say it because they needed that win and it's a division game. But, there's got to be a little bit of, if we can just squeak by the Jets without him, we'll get that extra rest. And
because, I mean, they have such a hard stretch here where they play the Cowboys and then the Ravens go to the Ravens and then the Bills, all big games. So,
right.
Man, Yanni, this is one of those games, like, I'm excited to watch it.
For sure.
And it's like you just said, it's really hard to know how this is going to play out. The Cowboys, man, I think the biggest thing you said that I just 100% agree with is both these teams are made to play from ahead. And it's almost like which one of them can get out ahead. And I think that's going to be a huge advantage because that unleashes Dallas's pass rush if Miami has to become more one-dimensional. If Miami gets up, they might be able to pound the ball then and, kind of keep it away from Dallas a little. So it's hard for me to call this one, even though Dallas's both of these defenses have been okay lately. It's hard for me to imagine Miami not scoring points here, especially if they have Tyreek Hill back. Like, to think that Miami scores less than like 27 would be surprising to me. And the total's 51. So if it's a close game, that's right around that total, right? If it's 27-24, that's the total. So I'm going around in circles here, just saying, I think it's a tough game to call. I probably won't bet it. I'm with you. If I had to bet it, it's hard for me to take the Cowboys away from home right now.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, it's like Cleveland. I'll bet them at home all day. It's hard for me to take them away from home. I feel the same way about Dallas right now. So
that's why I said I think you got to lean to the home team here. And I mean, conversely, I think you look at Miami a week later going to Baltimore, and that's going to be the opposite. That's going to be that game where, they're on the road playing a good team, and all of a sudden now their offense doesn't look so dynamic. And, I just think that this is a spot where the home team has the advantage. And conversely, if this were in Dallas and it were Dallas -2, I think you give the edge to Dallas in that game. So yeah.
I'm pretty positive that I would bet Dallas -2 in Dallas right now.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually feel more strongly about that than this way betting Miami in Miami.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree.
No.
But again, these teams, again, not to be a broken record, but they're mirror images.
They really are.
Which one is going to step up and be the alpha that beats the other good team here? I mean, we'll find out.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, hey, before we hit any other games, I have a couple that I like from a betting perspective, maybe not an entertainment perspective quite as much. Though, as you like to say, if you bet enough on it, it's entertaining. Let's skip over to the last game on Monday night. Could be a great game. Baltimore is going to San Francisco, the best team from each conference right now. San Francisco -5.5, so they're a big favorite here at home. They've looked the part of the best team in the league again here lately, but Baltimore just keeps winning too, and winning. Beat Jacksonville fairly comfortably, even though Jacksonville did plenty to give that game away. My goodness, Trevor Lawrence looked like he needed to go back to football school with some of his decision-making in that game, but that's for another time. What do you think happens in this game, Yanni, between two really good teams?
Well, I'll say this. There's no way, and I've talked about this for the last month, I'm not getting in the way of the San Francisco train. There's no way. With that being said, I think the Ravens are the right side here. I think San Francisco is going to win because I think they're a better team and they're at home. But Baltimore, I mentioned earlier, playing to your competition, that's like Baltimore's MO. I mean, they play to their competition more than anyone else. And whether they're playing the best team in the league, San Francisco, or whoever the worst team, Carolina, New England, whoever you're going to put it, the worst team there, it's like they kind of play to that. And granted, they've done a little better this year. I shouldn't totally put them in that bucket, but normally in the Lamar Jackson era, that's the way they've been. But I think when you look here, San Francisco, I wouldn't call it an Achilles heel, but their defense isn't playing great. You look at the talent.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you look at the talent in that front seven, and you're like, man, they should be shutting teams out, and they don't. Like, teams are running on them. And, they're throwing on them at times. And last week, not even necessarily great teams were moving the ball on them. You know what I mean? So I think that Baltimore is going to be able to move the ball enough, to keep this close. On the flip side there, Brock Purdy's been amazing. And I'm a fan. I'm not a critic in any way, shape, or form. And I think that Kyle Shanahan will put him in good situations. But he also, I don't think he's faced a pass defense like the Ravens up to this point. So that's not to say he can't beat them and have a great game. He absolutely could, but it's not a sure thing. It's like you go into a game against the Cardinals and you're like, yeah, he's probably going to throw 4 touchdowns because the Cardinals defense stinks and Kyle Shanahan's going to get Christian McCaffrey wide open and Deebo Samuel wide open and, do the things they do. But I don't know if he's under pressure against Baltimore. I mean, could he make some mistakes in this game? Could we maybe see a little bit of not MVP Brock Purdy, but a little bit more of last draft pick of the draft Brock Purdy, maybe? I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting. Long way of saying I think Baltimore covers this game, but I am not. I love San Francisco for the simple fact that the money I've made this year is all on the Niners. That's like where any profit comes from San Francisco this year. So it's like, I'm not getting in front of that and I'm not, whatever. But I do think this is a spot where San Francisco has to battle. And that's not to say they won't win. But this could certainly be 27-24. It could be one of those type situations.
I hadn't gotten to watch tons of Lamar Jackson this year. I don't have time to go back and watch every single game in its entirety or anything, but got to watch that Ravens game this last week. And one of the things that just blew me away, it's not a new thing for Lamar, but it just reminded me, his elusiveness is crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
He's got people just flying all around him in the pocket and he just sidesteps. The move I love that he does is he moves forward and they come with him and then he moves back again and then he gets out, and he did it over and over. And I forget who was commentating the game, but I thought one comment they made that was interesting is they said you can see Lamar evolving because he's still looking to pass the ball when he's escaping now.
Right.
And he still will run it. But I thought that was a really good point because he made some big plays because he created so much time. I'm not sure I trust San Francisco secondary to
Right.
hold up if Lamar does that. Now, I'm on board with you of not wanting to step in front of the 49ers. That offense has been amazing. I think Baltimore still has been a bit inconsistent this year, so I'm not sold that like their defense is just going to go in there and be dominant against this offense that's
Sure.
been rolling. So I don't have a strong position on this. I mean, if I had to bet one, I would bet Baltimore with the points. I think that maybe even as a teaser, I mean, I would think about it at least to take that up to like 13.5 for Baltimore. I don't imagine this being a massive blowout, but I also am a little bit interested in the over here. I mean, I know that both of these teams have pretty good defenses, but I just think matchup wise, it's okay for each team's offense against the other team's defense. And we're at 45.5, so it's not astronomically high. So that's, I mean, I've been betting, as I think you have San Francisco's team total over pretty much every week. Maybe I just do that again, but I feel like the Ravens are going to be able to score here too, with Lamar escaping and being able to throw the ball down the field.
As good as the Niners are, I don't think they're blowing them out. But you're right. I think that San Francisco is going to continue to score. And if you believe that San Francisco is going to continue to score and you don't think the Ravens are getting blown out, then that means Baltimore's scoring too. So, I mean, and you're right. That's not a terrible number. I mean, it's not like we're in the 50s there. So, yeah, I hear you. I mean, not the worst idea in the world for sure with these teams. I mean, you look at the talent that these teams have there. One thing that stinks for Baltimore, they've, with the exception of early in the year when J.K. Dobbins went down, they've stayed relatively healthy throughout the year, which, they haven't done the last 3 or 4 seasons. But that they lost Keaton Mitchell last night.
Yeah.
I think that they were just starting to really work him in to where he was kind of, even though he wasn't the starter, I think he was kind of de facto taking over for Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. And now they're back to good old reliable Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. And that's not a horrible thing. They're capable guys, but I think they're going to miss that burst that Mitchell potentially gave them, that we saw on display a little bit. So you wonder too, if that'll impact. I don't think it'll have a huge impact just because, again, you've got veteran guys that know that system that are going to go out there and run hard and whatever. But I do think, just long-term as we look ahead to the playoffs and in this matchup starting here, that's kind of one of those under the radar, blows that maybe not a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to, but that could have an impact on their offense.
Yep. All right. Well, we made it through some of the highlight games there. Let's go back through and just to wrap this up. Are there any bets that you like on games that we haven't talked about so far?
Yeah, I'll say this. There's some things that you can consider, but first of all, there's a lot of bets that I would never recommend that I will probably bet this week. Just being honest, and we've talked about this on your podcast, on your videos before. Doing a 3-team 10-point teaser is not a great way to live your life if you're doing sports betting. But when you look at, for example, the Bills, who you mentioned, you look at, Philadelphia at home against the Giants there, you start saying, all right, are they going to lose these games? So, I mean, I think that, if you're one of those, I'm going to call it recreational bettors, there's some fun opportunities out there for different teasers and that. But as I look at this here, there's the one that stands out to me here is actually, and I hate to say it because they're so bad, but the Commanders getting points against the Jets. And I don't know that I'll bet it because, again, it's the Commanders, but I actually think, with Trevor Siemian in there, I mean, I think that the Commanders are still, I don't know, a decent team. So I don't know, you could look at that. But the one game that I like here, and this is chalky and this is square, but I think the Colts beat the crap out of the Falcons in this game. Maybe not beat the crap out of them, but they're 1.5-point favorites. So they basically just need to freaking win. And I mean, we saw Atlanta. I mean, I understand it was raining and, it was a division game, but they lost to the freaking Panthers, dude, man.
It's so bad, man.
Yeah. And I mean, do I think the Colts are some amazing team? No, but I think that, to me, when you're almost at a pick 'em and you've got that, it's like that NFC South versus the AFC South. I'm just looking at that and saying Indianapolis is going to win this game, aren't they? aren't they?
Can I just on that game real quick? The
Yeah.
coaching discrepancy is massive.
Well, right. There you
Tyson has
go.
looked great this year. And
Right.
I think the only way that Atlanta hangs in that game is if they win the turnover battle by 2 or 3.
Sure. Yep.
Aside from that, I agree. That's one of the ones I have written down. I already bet them at -1.5, actually.
Yeah.
I was sitting there thinking about it, and I just thought the same of like, aside from something crazy, they got to win this game.
I mean, it's almost that old betting cliche of this one smells fishy, man. Like, why is it
Right,
only
right.
1.5? Like, it should be 3, right? Like it, but I don't know. I mean, I guess, and I mean, we know Indy's got some injuries, and obviously it's a road game, and again, they're not necessarily great. So maybe that spread's right. But I just, again, it's almost to me, this is one where it's like, don't overthink it. They're better than the Falcons. Like, just bet it and live with it,
Agreed.
So yeah.
All right.
That's about it though.
Okay. I had just a couple others. So I hate to say it, but the one I like the most, I bet the Packers -4 at Carolina. Yeah. It's 4.5 now. I'm actually thinking about adding more. I think they win this game by 2 touchdowns plus.
Good call.
This is what I say of swinging back and forth. I mean, people were all up on the Packers 2 weeks ago. Jordan Love is Aaron Rodgers now. We found our franchise quarterback. 2 weeks later, some iffy stuff from Jordan Love, no doubt. But now it's like, oh, the Packers are terrible. No, I think Jordan Love is decent. He's probably not the second coming of Aaron Rodgers, but he probably doesn't suck either. Yeah. And the Packers are a pretty good team. After losing last week, I just think they destroy the Panthers here. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually did have that jotted down as well. And I think you're right. And the crazy thing, well, when you look at where the Packers have struggled, which is surprising, their pass DVOA is terrible. They're like 30th, but the Panthers aren't the type of team that can exploit that. Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean?
Like exploit much of anything.
Right. So it's kind of like, okay, even if that's an area where the Packers have really struggled, and the Packers haven't really gotten their running game going here, but I think you can run on that Carolina defense. So yeah.
And Aaron Jones has been out too, and he looked pretty good coming back last week when they got him the ball. So I think that's big for them too.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's hard to not see them winning and covering in this game for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I love that one. And then just the other two I'll throw out quick. We're recording this before the Monday night game's over. It's a few minutes in now, which is why we're going to wrap up so we can go watch. But Seattle -2.5 at Tennessee. Seattle has had a brutal schedule. Mm-hmm. And they've actually played okay against some really good teams. I don't think Tennessee is a good team. So I like Seattle -2.5, or maybe that line gets even better if Philly thumps them tonight. And then Jacksonville -1 against Tampa Bay. Same kind of thing. I just don't think Tampa Bay's okay. All those NFC South teams at their best are okay. Jacksonville has looked bad lately, no doubt. But I just think that that's a game that Jacksonville should win. So at -1, I like Jacksonville there. Those are my others.
I'll be honest, and I don't know that I'll bet it, but I'm on the other side with Tampa there. And again, you don't want to get too caught up in 1 week. Baker Mayfield looked amazing. 1 week, we're not gonna get too crazy there. But to me, this is more of a sign of Jacksonville and kind of where they are right now. And I just think that they're banged up a little bit. And I think there's like an element of, I don't want to call it, and again, we don't know, but I think there's an element of confidence maybe that's lacking there. And, once you start losing a few games, you start maybe playing tense, like, oh, we're tied for the lead of the division now, and Houston's looking good and Indy's winning. I worry about the Jags here down the stretch, and maybe because you and I have talked, we both got exposure, I think, on their futures as far as division winners.
That we do.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm not feeling great about it. So, when you look at that there, but it's for me, this game's less about thinking, oh, Tampa's amazing and they're gonna. This is almost like a fade Jacksonville for me right now, and you're right. I mean, I think overall Jacksonville still is probably a better team. But I don't know, man. I'm a little hesitant on Jacksonville right now. It's one of those words like I don't want to touch them. I just want to stay far away from them right now.
I'll take the money. I'd consider betting on that and just go add more to Green Bay instead.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. There you go. Yeah.
All right, man. Hey, thanks for jumping on tonight. Let's go enjoy some Monday Night Football and hopefully have a good Christmas, football and otherwise. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you, your family, everybody listening. Have some football, have some fun. Talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good, man.